this is going to be the lesson that is going to show you how to do the double crochet. And I just filmed the single crochet. So sorry if I was too close. Okay, so once you've practiced, like I told you to do in the single crochet until you can actually make a square without your project going kind of diagonal, then you're ready to start the next step, which is the double crochet. So again, we want to make our slip knot. Move that out of the way. Then fold it till we get our pretzel, and then go under to make our slip knot. Now, to do the double crochet, as all stitches, you need to start with a chain. So I'm going to do a chain of 8 again. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, for the single crochet, you only used 1 chain because it's 1 step up. You know, like you only had to do a chain 1 at the end of your single crochets to start your next set of your next row, because it's only 1 step up. Now for the double crochet, you're doing essentially 2 single crochets, one on top of the other, and so it's like 2 rows up. Now you may be thinking, why don't you just do double crochets then? You could do a whole row of you know, all at once. You can do 2 rows all at once. Well, the reason for that is because there's such thing as spaces. So if you did a lot of double crochets, you would have these bigger spaces in between. I mean, they wouldn't be this wide, but wait, I'll show you real quick. The single crochet, it's a much tighter stitch. If you do the double crochet, and I just want to show you the spacing real fast. See, you have these bigger spaces in between. The single crochet, and I'll just do a few here. 1, 2, 3. Now see, these single crochets it's more of a solid. You can make a lot warmer stuff using that. Now the double crochet, you're going to have these big spaces here. So you have these big spaces in between double crochet, but single crochets don't have that. It's more of a solid stitch. So if you're wanting to make something that's warmer, I recommend just doing 2 rows of single crochets versus the 1 row of double crochets, leaving yourself these big spaces. So if you want to make like a lacier afghan, then double crochets are probably the way to go. But there's also something called half double crochet, but I'll teach you that in another tutorial. So basically, like I was saying, the single crochet is only 1. So in order to do the single crochet, all you had to do was just skip 1 stitch. Remember, this first one nearest your hook doesn't count. You can't go into it anyway. So your first actual stitch is the 2nd chain from the hook. So what you would do is just go right into this one. But with a double crochet, it takes actually 2 stitches. So you'd want to go into the 3rd chain. So this first chain is not really a chain at all. It's just basically it's your holding of your loop. So only this chain here counts as 1 and 2. So you have 2 chains, and you'll want to go into this one. So if you wanted to count, this first one would be 1, then the second one would be 2, and then this would be 3rd. When counting, even though you can't go into this very first chain, it's still counted as a chain. So you would still count this one closest to your hook as 1, and then the first actual chain you can work in as 2, and then the next one as your 3rd chain. And this is the one that you're going to be going in. So the next thing you need to know is, because it's 2 basically rows at the same time, you're going to need to do a yarn over first, which means you're going to have to grab yarn up first and then find that stitch you need to go in, and then insert your hook. So it's not just inserting your hook, that's it. You need to yarn over first before you put your hook into the stitch you want to work in. Then you will pull the loop through that stitch just like you do a single crochet, only instead of having 2 loops on your hook, you'll have 3. The middle one is the yarn over, the one where you did this before you went in. So that adds another loop by yarning over first. So now to do the double crochet, you're only going to be yarning over and pulling through 2, leaving that last loop on your hook. And then you'll repeat, yarn over and pull through the other 2. So you're pulling through 2 loops at a time. And that's your first double crochet. And the reason why we skipped down to the 3rd instead of working in the very next one is because then this first stitch would be pulled down because it doesn't have the stretch. You really need the 2 chains for the 2 rows you're creating by doing the double crochet. So now again, you always want to yarn over when doing the double crochet. Find your next stitch. So you won't be skipping any stitches from now on. That was only the very first one. You'll be going right into your next stitch and pulling up a loop. 3 loops on your hook. Now you're going to be yarning over and pulling through 2 loops at a time. So yarn over, pull through the first 2, then yarn over and pull through the next 2. And then you'll repeat. Yarn over, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through only 2 loops, then yarn over and pull through only 2 loops. And you will continue this all the way down your row. And I should have 6 double crochets because I had to skip 2 chains in order to make my very first double crochet. So let me just count here. Yep, I have 6 double crochets. Now this beginning chain that you had to skip 1, 2, 3 to begin your very first stitch, these 2 chains can be counted in some patterns as the very first stitch. So if it tells you when you go back to do your last stitch in the chain 2, that's what it means. It means these 2 beginning chains here where you had to skip over to the 3rd chain, those 2 leftover chains there will be your beginning chain 2. So in a pattern or something, keep that in mind. And now when you start your second row of double crochets, you will do a chain of 2. So 1, 2, and then turn. So make sure I have my yarn here. Okay. So again, you'll be working in the stitch and you'll be going under both loops of the stitch, but remember to always yarn over. Find that first stitch and then you can work your double crochet in that. Now something else I want to mention before I go into that stitch is in some patterns as well, this chain 2 will count as your very first stitch and you don't even need to go into this very first stitch because if you do, it's going to add 1. So for the most part, if it doesn't tell you that you need to go into this very first stitch, then you could probably just skip this very first stitch, use your chain 2 as the first stitch and then move on. Because if you can put another double crochet into the same stitch, this may give you an increase, which can cause your pattern to start to turn. So on a rule, I usually do chain 2 and then I skip this first one because the chain 2 counts as that first stitch and I go right into my second one. So this is going to help ensure that your project stays in a square. So you skip the first stitch and just go into the second. And then do your double crochet. So now the chain 2 is your first stitch of the row, and that is your second stitch of the row. Yarn over, and as you remembered, I had 6 double crochets in my first row and my beginning chain 2. So to count the chain 2 as a stitch, it would give me 7 stitches total. So also to ensure that you have your project as a square, it helps to count. So my chain 2 here at the beginning is going to be 1, and then the first double crochet of the row will be 2, then the one I just did there is 3, and then this is 4. Yarn over, go into the next stitch under both loops, which will be 5, and then yarn over and go into the last stitch, which is 6. Now this chain 2 at the end, I'm going to put a double crochet worked in the top of the chain. When you have 2 chains, you have a bottom chain and a top chain for a chain 2, chain 3, whatever. So with the chain 2, you have a bottom chain and top chain. You're always going to be working in the top chain because that's the top of your stitch. So find that top of your chain, and if you need to turn your project like this so you can see the chain, do it, and then do your last double crochet worked in that stitch. Now you can count. Counting the chain 2 at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you can count back this way, counting the chain 2 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 7 stitches on the bottom, 7 stitches on the top. So this is how you're going to be consistent to keep your project square. Remember, you always want to chain 2, 1, 2 as your step up to the next round. And remember that this now will become something that you will work at the end of your next row. So not the one you're doing obviously now, you'll be using this one, but the next row, this will be your stitch here. So turn. Again, skip this very first stitch. I'm going to count the chain 2 as the stitch for that row. And then yarn over, go into the next stitch of the row and start your double crochets. And again, take your time. I know I'm a bit faster. Pause the video if you want. I'm just trying to get to the end real quick. So go ahead and pause the video until you can work your way to the very end of the row. I just want to take you to the very end. See now this very last, and I want to show you a little clearer here. You can see now it's kind of on the side here, it almost looks like a chain of 3. Like this is one stitch because it has 2 loops. This is another stitch with these 2 loops, and then there's this stitch. Now this, if you just turn it a little bit, you can see this one here is part of the row. This one here is just the step up. So you want to work in that last stitch of the row, and also counting helps. And now you have only the chain 2, 1, 2 on the end. You're working in the top of the 2, top of the chain. So I'm going into that top chain only, pulling up a loop, and I'm finishing my row. Then again on the next row you'll be chaining 2 and then continuing. Sometimes, as you can see here, it can be pulling a little bit from this side. This very first beginning chain can be like that. The only way to really help this not be so pulley like this on the side is having a looser beginning chain. So just for that beginning chain, it helps to have it kind of a little loose. If not, then your projects can do this at the beginning and then the rest can be loose. So it's very important to get that chaining down. But mine's not so bad because I did pretty much a looser chain at the beginning. But you can see the sides are straight. And then again, keep counting your stitches. Make sure that you'll have the exact amount of stitches you have on your first row, and you're working in the correct stitch every time. And you should have your project end up to be a nice square. And if you don't mind the spaces, this could be a really nice quick scarf, a really quick way to work up a scarf or something. And that's it. So keep practicing on your double crochet, and make sure you can get it into a square, and you start to recognize your chain 2 versus your first stitch. And then I will be back here to show you the next lesson.